yearning for your cure. This humble servant will be diverted from you no more.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to welcome you, dear viewers, to another in our series, The Best of Tawheed. And in this series, we're looking at the best evidence found in the Quran and the Sunnah, and the explanations of the companions of Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, as well as that of early scholars, which give us a clear picture of what, in fact, is Tawheed in Islam. Now, many anthropologists and sociologists, social scientists, in looking at religion under the influence of Darwinian theory of how humans evolved, they had developed, and many people still look at religion from their perspective, an evolutionary model. According to them, human beings, early human beings, the first ones that evolved from a common ancestor with the apes, the first human beings, human families and tribes that evolved, they used to deify the forces of nature. According to them, when early man came in contact with the cataclysmic and devastating forces of nature, like lightning, thunder, volcanoes, and earthquakes, they saw them as superior beings, supreme beings, powerful. This was the signs of their power. And they sought to appease them the way that they appeased their leaders. The one who was the head of the tribe had to be appeased. People brought things to him, keep him happy, so that he would look down on them well. So they looked at these forces of nature in the same way that they needed to be appeased. So they made sacrifices, they brought food and different things to these forces of nature. And this is how early religion began, according to them. They gave the example of the North American Indians, who believe in the spirits of the rivers and the forests, etc., as an example of this early stage in the evolution of religion, which is known as animism. Animism involves giving divinity or spiritual life to elements of nature, trees, stones, rocks, rivers, seas, etc. So after that stage, then according to them, people started to develop personal gods which were for regions, clans, etc. And this stage, the stage of the family gods, special gods for each family, etc., they give the example of the polytheistic Hindus of India, where every family may have its own personal god. And as economic necessity and war produced nations, families were absorbed into nations, then the tribal gods of the leading families became the main gods of the nations. And the numbers of gods became fewer and fewer as time passed. More areas were conquered. The leading god of the leading family became the god of the area or the region, the country, etc. But prior to becoming one, it reached the point of two gods. And of course, the example they give is that of the Zoroastrians of Persia, who have a god of good and a god of evil. Said, okay, so things evolved down till you reach two gods. And then after that, you now had the one God pop up. Okay, and actually in the pharaohs who have multiple gods, their stage was similar to that of the Hindus. They had a number of gods for different families. Even some of the rulers were considered to be gods. In the 14th century BC, one of the Egyptian rulers, Akhenaten, also known as Amenhotep IV, he introduced the idea of one God. The sun was the symbol, Ra. The disk of the sun became the symbol of that one God. So that was the evolutionary development to one God. However, what we see is that, of course, after Akhenaten's death, then multiple gods were brought back in. And if we look at the various religions around the world, even though they may have a number of gods, they generally have, almost every last one of them generally has belief in one God, one supreme God over all the others. The other gods became like intermediaries, demigods. Some of them were half human, half God, etc. And that is more in keeping with the idea that people were monotheistic and their beliefs became corrupted until they became polytheistic. And the examples we gave, even of the Zoroastrians, who have a God of good and a God of evil, even in their system with the two gods, the God of good is the superior God. He is the one who will win out in the struggle between the two. So he is the ultimate God. And that's what they hold. But they just have another God that struggles with him until the end of this world. So actually, when looking at what has happened to Christianity, when looking at what has happened also to Islam, we have to say that the degenerative model, that people degenerated from Tawheed, from the Unitarian belief, into polytheism, that is in fact more keeping with what we know of the history of the various religions in the various societies. The claim that early man deified nature, this is just a fairy tale. Nobody was around then, nothing has been written of that time. We don't have evidence for it. It's just a blank claim. Whereas the evidences for monotheism, we do have it. Corruption of monotheism after the time of the prophets is recorded. So we have a much clearer picture when we follow the degeneration model than we do when we try to follow the evolutionary model. Because of course the evolutionary model is based on the theory of evolution, which itself is questionable. It posits concepts which are not really founded in clear evidence. It's only supposition that human beings evolved from ape-like creatures, sharing a common ancestor with the apes. This belief is the belief used to justify atheism, that we have no God, in fact. Because if we and the monkeys, the apes, share the same common origin, and you don't see any monkeys worshiping God, creating temples and idols that they worship. So then the question is, why do we? And of course, this kind of argument or this kind of view is very common among the social anthropologists, social scientists, who tend to look at human beings and judge their actions based on what animals do. So they say, since animals don't do that, it means it's something that we have learned, probably not good for us, better not to do it. So they promote time and time again the idea that we should be like animals. And so you had a big, strong movement there which is known as the nudist movement, where people promoted nudity, that we shouldn't be clothed. You know, you don't see any monkeys, chimpanzees wearing clothes, except for those that we've put clothes on. They said we should be natural. You know, this idea that you have to cover yourself is like, you know, some kind of a psychological thing which the society is putting on you. You should be free, open. So they had nudist colonies, nudist parks in Europe, where mom, dad, the kids all went stark naked to the park. Even the person who's selling ice cream there, he's naked. The whole park in nudity. They felt this is going back to nature, going back to the norm for human existence. But of course, this remained with a small segment of society, though we had nudist beaches and things like that came along. Still, the majority of people didn't really accept this way of thinking. We're going to pause here for a break before looking at the origin of shirk. Where did shirk come from? If the beginning of our faith as human beings was in Tawheed, so how did shirk enter our ranks in the first place? We'll be looking at that in our coming segment. We'll see you after the break.
Who was the first prophet? Was a prophet the first one to read and write? Did God speak to a prophet? A prophet in a prison. A prophet who commanded the birds, insects, and animals? Want to know more? Join us for Stories of the Prophet.
Stories of the Prophets, every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 10:30 a.m. India on Peace TV. The voice of truth.
That Allah does not look at your face, but rather Allah looks at your heart and looks at your action.
We Muslims know life is a test.
And so in order for us to have peace, there must be standards, there must be proof.
The voice of justice.
Indeed, to all nations we send a messenger, that they will call people to worship one God, Allah.
The one who is the only one who can grant true peace.
That we are looking for.
The voice of peace.
The last and final instruction manual for the human being, it is the glorious Quran.
The voice standing up for all of humanity against all falsehood. Islamic Voice, tomorrow at 10:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 1 p.m. India on Peace TV.
Say indeed, my prayer, my sacrifice, my life and my death are all for Allah, sustainer of the world.
A dynamic.
I challenge any human being to point out a single fundamental of Islam
In youthful quest.
Which is against humanity as a whole.
Iconic, inspiring, encouraging.
Don't judge Islam based on the following.
Farik Naik.
Judge Islam based on the authentic sources. That's the glorious Quran and the authentic Hadith.
Son of the world-famous orator on Islam and comparative religion, Dr. Zakir Naik.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us an opportunity to do a prophet job and to earn a prophet reward.
A star above par in Teens Star. Next on Peace TV.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back from the break. Prior to the break, we were looking at how did shirk begin. And alhamdulillah, Allah and His Messenger have given us a clear picture of the beginning of shirk. When did it first occur? How did it appear? And that can be found in Surah An-Nuh. Surah An-Nuh, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in verse 23, they said to each other, do not give up your gods do not give up Wad and Suwa, nor Yaghuth, Ya'uq, and Nasr. This reference, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ clarified what was it in fact referring to. This is verse 23, Surah Nuh. Ibn Abbas, considered one of the leading scholars among the Sahaba, or companions of the Prophet, known as the leading commentator of the Quran, he said these were idols of Prophet Noah's nation, which in time ended up among the Arabs. Wad became the tribal god of Kalb tribe, the Kalb tribe, and in the region of Dawmatul Jandal. Suwa' was adopted by Hudayl tribe, Yaghuth by the tribe of Ghutayf at Jurf near Saba, Ya'uq by the Hamdan tribe, and Nasr became the god of Dhul Khala, Dhul Kala, clan of the Himyar tribe. And Nasr became the god of the Dhul Kala clan of the Himyar tribe. These idols were named after some righteous people from among the people of Prophet Noah or Prophet Noah. When these righteous people died, Satan inspired the people to make statues of them and make pictures of them and place them in the places where these righteous people used to advise their followers, the people in the society, as a means of remembering them. Now, the people accepted that idea and they made these statues. Statues in the different settings, where they gathered, places of worship, etc. The statues were placed so that whenever the people would come to these different locations, they would see the statues and it would remind them of these righteous people, and they would try to do more righteousness and to worship God. However, when this generation died out, Satan came back to the generation following them and told them that it was because of their ancestors' worship of these statues, carvings, paintings, etc., that the crops were good, the harvest was profitable, and they had the success that they had. As a result, the descendants were fooled and they began to worship them as idols. And of course, the following generations after them continued that worship. So this was the root, image making was the root by which worship of other than God entered in. Satan gave that early generation an idea which sounded good, gave them the idea to make these images in order to remind the people to be righteous. And then when people forgot the purpose of those images, generations later, Satan came back and told them that this worship, their foreparents were actually worshiping these images. And it is through their worship of the images that they had good harvest, they had, wealth, they were successful, their nation grew. And people fell for it and began to worship these idols. And it's because of that that in the early scriptures and repeated in the Islamic teachings, that image making images by hand, human hand, creating images of living beings is forbidden. So we can find, for example, in the Old Testament, where it states there very clearly, in Exodus, verse 4, chapter 20, You shall not make for yourself any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. So, as a result of this, early Christianity carefully avoided the use of images in their worship. However, as it spread, and of course we said Christianity was the invention of Paul, as it spread into Greece and into Rome, where people already had a strong tradition of worshiping idols, the god of Greeks and the Romans, then making of religious statues for religious purposes, depicting Jesus, depicting his mother Mary, depicting the disciples, etc., this began. It was introduced and people accepted it because the original followers of Jesus had been dispersed. They were no longer around anyone to oppose this development. So Satan was successful in directing people into idol worship. So this was the situation which occurred amongst Christians, and to some degree it has occurred amongst Muslims. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he had clearly said that those who receive the greatest punishment on the Day of Judgment are the image makers, those who make images of human beings, animals, birds, fishes, etc. Because this is the channel, this is the door through which idolatry enters. So as Muslims, we're not allowed to make these images. Of course, photography is not included as long as it remains as recording what is there and not using airbrush and different techniques to create new images. So it's no longer a picture of somebody as they were, but a new painting or image has been created of that person, which is false. That is in fact Islamically prohibited. We also have a statement from Aisha, wife of the Prophet ﷺ, in which she said, "Once the Prophet came to see me, and I had my closet covered with a woolen curtain, which had pictures of winged horses on it. When he saw the curtain, the color of his face changed, and he said, 'O Aisha, those receiving the most severe punishment on the day of resurrection are those who compete with Allah's act of creation. They will be punished and asked to bring to life what they have created.'" The Prophet went on to say, "Certainly angels do not enter houses in which pictures and statues are present." Aisha then said, "So we cut up the curtain into pieces and made out of it 2 pillows." So the practice in Islam is opposed to image making as it was originally in Christian tradition, what came to be known as Christianity, found in Judaism, which is why if you go to any synagogue, the Jewish house of worship, you will not see any images in it. And that is why also in the mosques of Muslims you do not see any images. But Christians, where degeneration took place, they introduced images, which was the same trick which Satan played on the descendants in the time of Prophet Nuh, which led to idolatry then, and Christians were also drawn into idolatry through making of statues and images, which were initially claimed to be religious, but in the end became objects of worship. With that, we are going to end our episode from the best of Tawheed. And we hope to see you in our up and coming episodes in which we'll be looking at the different ways by which Islam sought to prevent the degeneration of the faith into other forms of idol worship. So we'll see you in the future in our coming episodes, and we now bid you farewell. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Oh Lord, here I am, pleading at your door. Send me your mercy, send me your peace, or I am lost for sure. Oh Lord, here I am, pleading at your door. Send me your mercy, send me your peace, or I am lost for sure. Oh Lord, here I am, yearning for your cure. This humble servant